All right, so Hillary Clinton doing some damage control this week, trying to walk back controversial comments that she made about immigration and refugees in Europe. Clinton told The Guardian, I think Europe needs to get a handle on migration because that is what lit the flame. If we don't deal with the migrant issue, it will continue to roil the body politic. She clarified those comments in a series of tweets on Friday, saying in part, on both sides of the Atlantic, we need reform, not open borders, but immigration laws enforced with fairness and respect for human rights. Nayara Haque and Mehdi Hassan are both back with me once again. Also joining the conversation, Wendy Osefo, a professor at Johns Hopkins University and contributor for The Hill. So, Nayara, let me begin with you. Was this a misstep for Hillary Clinton? I mean, was she off base in making these remarks to The Guardian? How do you break these comments down?
Sure. I mean, it's part of a broader speech she was making about the challenges facing the world today. And because it's Hillary Clinton, and this is how people have been trained to react to her, people cherry pick every single word and sentence. And I appreciate that she gave a more thoughtful, complete statement on Twitter earlier and clarified what everything meant and the context for that, because it clearly is a problem, as we were seeing from video images even earlier in this show, that migration is an issue. And it is something that people like Donald Trump have taken advantage of to stoke fear and bias. People like Angela Merkel have also come under attack in her own country by conservatives and nationalists for being more welcoming. So clearly going to be the challenge, the foreign policy challenge, becoming a domestic challenge going forward, not just for the Trump administration, but potentially for the world for decades to come.
So, Mehdi, let me give you a chance to respond to that and get your take on it. Are we, and me included in the media here, are we making too much ado about this? Was this an insignificant comment? Should we not be paying as much attention to what Hillary Clinton says in Europe as we are with this?
No, I don't agree. I think, look, for the past 2 years, Eamon, I was starting to feel sorry for Hillary Clinton. I was kind of like, oh, when you look at Donald Trump in the White House, you think, wow, she would have done 100% much better job. And then you see these comments she makes to The Guardian, and they are outrageous comments. They are inaccurate, they're inflammatory, they're dangerous, they're offensive. She said that Europe has done its part for refugees. Just not true. 85% of the world's refugees live in developing countries, in the poorest countries, not in Europe. She says migrants lit the flame of nationalism and the far right. Just not true. It wasn't migrants who crashed the world economy in 2008. It wasn't migrants who gave us austerity policies in the past few years. It wasn't migrants who launched a series of devastating wars across the Middle East, which helped cause some of these crises. I just don't buy this link either, this idea that, if you look across Europe, Eamon, the areas with the fewest immigrants tend to be the places that vote for far-right parties. The same in the US, where Donald Trump came to power in 2016, talking about immigration, even though illegal border crossings were at an all-time, 40-year low. So I don't buy this argument. It's been tried, this argument that you try and kind of out-hawk the immigration hawks. The centre-left have tried this over the last 10 years. It doesn't work. You don't beat racists by copying them. You can't defeat fascism by meeting them in the middle. You can't out-Trump Trump or out-far-right the far right. It just doesn't work, and it's deeply irresponsible. And I don't buy that Twitter thread was a clarification. She did not disown the central remarks that Europe's done enough. It hasn't. That it should stop showing refuge. And the key point, that migrants lit the flame. Just not true.
Wendy, this is what Clinton had to say about immigration during one of the presidential debates back in 2016.
There are a lot of refugees, women and children. There are children suffering in this catastrophic war, largely, I believe, because of Russian aggression, and we need to do our part.
So in the past, if you look at some of those comments, like with the one that we just played, she's been a strong advocate for migrants and refugees. And her comments, though, to The Guardian are actually signaling a different position. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Has President Trump shifted the politics and the views of the base of American politics to the far right on the issue of refugees in a dangerous way?
I think that what's really interesting, along with those comments that she made, we also know that her 2016 slogan was, we do not denigrate immigrants, instead we embrace them. So her comments really sounded Trumpian, and I believe that for any politician, whether you sit on the left or the right side of the aisle, you have to be very careful about your rhetoric, especially given our political climate. And if I could be very honest here, her comments were beyond the pale. She should not have said what she said, and I also did not buy the thread in which she gave. I think that this country and a lot of our politicians have this notion and this outright position where we continue to make different people scapegoats when it comes to our political ideology. We saw this during the civil rights era when black people were seen as the targets when it was time for us to, desegregate schools, and women during the women's suffrage. And we're seeing this again when it comes to immigrants. We see the images that are going on right now on the southern border. These are human beings. They're not individuals who should be used as political pawns. And I believe that that's what Hillary Clinton was doing when she was making those comments. We can no longer say that these individuals are the problem. They're not the problem. They're not scapegoats. And we have to call a spade a spade.
And to that point, Naira, this morning leaders in Europe reached an agreement on Brexit, a decision that influenced in part by the refugee crisis. So I'm curious to get your thoughts, because the Washington Post put it this way: 2 years after the Brexit vote, polls show attitudes about migrants have mellowed in the UK. Does that show that the issue of immigration is unpredictable with voters? You have a president in the United States who uses all kinds of exaggerations, if you will, lies, if you will, about the caravans to spread that kind of fear for his politics, for his base. And the same thing happens in Europe as well.
Absolutely. It is a tool that people tend to use in election season to drive how they want to drive their base, whether they want to drive a base by hope of what you can be as a country or the fear of what your country will become. Immigration has become one of those issues that is a global challenge. And refugees are now to the tune of, and displaced people to the tune of 60 million people. And they, as Mehdi mentioned, they are in the developing part of the world, and Europe has kept its borders high. The United States is now doing the same. This challenge of 60 million people with no place to go is not going to go away anytime soon. It's going to require some really serious policy thinking, developing some new systems of how to work, and that's not going to happen in the hyper-partisan context we have right now.
And Wendy, very quickly, I want to ask you, does something like this with Hillary Clinton affect her legacy? And, whether for good or bad, does it change some of the attitudes within the Democratic Party among her standing?
I think that, we all know that our memories last a very long time, and people are going to remember this, especially people who are pro-immigration. I just think that what we want to know from our politicians is what side of the fence do you stand on? And right now, it seemed as though her comments were contradictory. And so we need to know, where does she stand when it comes to immigration? Because you cannot stand in the middle. You cannot be neutral in times like this.
All right, Naira Haq, Mehdi Hassan, Wendy Osefo, thank you guys very much for joining us today. Appreciate your insights as always.